up in quarterly closings, etc., and especially month end, Friday, week closing. So I'm really appreciative of the time that you really took out time to talk to us. And as I keep hearing from my other panelists, the CXOs I've worked with in the last couple of weeks, Friday is also webinar time. So all my panelists get called for webinars. So thank you. I keep reminding everyone, thank you for choosing us over others. Today is the third of our Leading from the Front series. And this is something we've been doing for the last couple of weeks. And we intend to do this for the next 3 odd months. So 12 Fridays, 24 CXOs. That's the plan. Essentially, in this time of disruption, sharing knowledge, sharing information, sharing ideas, insights, inspirations. What is it that is working for you and how? And we always have a great audience that joins in and participates through chats, etc. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining. Really a pleasure to have you, and make yourselves comfortable. This is going to be 1 hour's typically fun conversations, because I don't really like to keep this too serious. We will do our serious bit, but then move to the interesting bits in a bit. Okay, so before I start, this is something, again, some people pointed out to me that many people who join as audiences don't know who we are. So I represent a company called The Painted Sky and Ubiquity, and we are a learning and development company, leadership development company. We've been doing it for a long time, 15 odd years across the world. As you can see in the images, we do a lot of stuff using painting, theater, music, 3D model building, etc. So art-based learnings, we have a very strong presence in executive coaching. And of course, we are the first consulting firm that introduced design thinking trainings in India. And we continue to do that. And that led us to found our second company, Ubiquity, which is a design thinking school. Pretty much India's only design thinking school as of now. So enough about us, enough about me. Let us get started. And I'll take a minute to introduce my panelists, some very, very interesting people. Before I start, I must tell you that when I work with finance teams, I'm always worried. For 2 reasons. I have no head for finance. My partner looks after all of that. And B, I'm always intimidated by finance people, because of all the corporate functions I work with, I find finance guys to be the most smart, and also, I would say, the ability to find me completely at sea. So when Adobe reached out to us saying that we want to do a design thinking workshop for the finance team at Adobe, I was worried and a little skeptical. Firstly, because I was worried because these are going to be smarter people in the room than I am. And the second part of it is skeptical because in my 27 years working with consumers, finance teams and innovation haven't really gone hand in hand in most of the experiences that I've had, because you don't expect the finance team to be very creative. You know what creative accounting can lead to. So, but when I worked with Raghu, he was amazing. I mean, first of all, I think I've told you this, Raghu, and I will say again, not just in finance teams, but you're among the finest design thinking practitioner teams that I've ever worked with. Your team just floored me with its enthusiasm, with their energy, with their willingness to learn and experiment. And I'm delighted to see that you applied that and you became pretty much a pioneer of innovation in the FP&A function at Adobe, which is absolutely brilliant. And I'm so happy that you managed to do that and you took the learnings to application all the way. So that's absolutely delightful. What I didn't know about this, of course, was that your bicycling abilities. Now, not just the finance part, but this is another thing that intimidates me, anything to do with fitness. So bicycling from 6,800 feet to 18,340 feet is scary right now for me to sit here and talk about it also. But congratulations on that as well. So thank you so much for joining. Another thing that we have in common, Raghu and I, along with design thinking, is of course that both of us have 2 retrievers, 2 dogs, and they're pretty much around somewhere. Thank you for coming, Raghu. Moving on to Anand. Well, Anand and I go back a long way. We know each other for 15 years. So thank you, Anand, for taking time out to join. Anand leads the finance function as well as the India site for RAMBUS Chip Technologies, which is a semiconductor giant in the US, and it has a setup here. So Anand is a CA, a complete finance professional with a razor sharp brain when it comes to analyzing and essentially explaining tax to me because I have no idea at all. And he manages to do that in terms of how, I mean, from apples, oranges, and tomato level, he brings it down and makes me understand. So thank you for doing that for 15 years. So Anand has 30 odd years of experience in finance. As you can see, he started in ITC, moved to Dell. I met him when he was at Fidelity. And now, of course, for the last 9 years, he's been at Rambus and now leading Rambus. What many of you don't know is that Anand is a concert level singer. He is easily the best Kishore Kumar sounding voice I have, maybe at times better. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But he is brilliant. His singing is immaculate. And I've heard him sing. And if we ever get a chance on any of these sessions, we must have Anand singing. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining. Once again, I really appreciate the time you're taking. Without further ado, let's get started. And today, our topic is what I've been actually throwing at all my panelists in the past, and I'll do that today as well. For the last, how many years, we have talked Vision 2020 as if it's been that one destination for all of us, that that's what we go aim for, that's what we get to. And now that 2020 is here, what are we facing is unprecedented. I mean, forget the pandemic and locusts and violence on the streets to I don't know what all. 2020 vision is no longer seeming like what is really a North Star for organizations or teams to really aim for. Or even if you did and you've arrived here, what do you do now is a very interesting point to find ourselves in. So that's our topic today. Vision 2020 is no longer enough. And what would leadership mean in this disrupted world? So I'm going to go off the share and now I'm going to bring my panelists' videos up. So here we go. And let us get started. For my guests, the attendees, the chats are running. So anytime you want to comment on something or send us a question, please send it to us. We are going to keep the last 20 odd minutes for Q&A. So we would look forward to listening to what you have to say and your ideas. All right, so let's get started. And I'm going to start with Anand, who I ended with. So Anand, you tell me a little bit, a couple of minutes about the work you do and what Rambus does in India.
Sure. Thank you, Anirban. First of all, again, a pleasure. But in the interest of time, let me go ahead. So Rambus is as you rightly said, it's a technology player in the semiconductor industry. It was founded in 1990 by two Stanford professors based in California. And it's went public in 1997. It's present in North America, Europe, Asia, and we have an office in Bangalore. The best way to describe Rambus is to look at the name itself, RAM and bus. So RAM as in random access memory, and bus in normal parlance would mean vehicle to move something, but in our context, it would mean moving data between the processor and the RAM and port, and between chips. So that is the technology that we specialize in. And keeping in that space itself, there's another product. In fact, this is a physical chip that we have started recently shipping out of Taiwan and Korea. It resides between the memory banks and the processor, and what it does is to synchronize data. This is extensively used in data center. Now, both these technologies are pervasive in modern computing and is very critical to performance and data-intensive applications. Apart from these two, we are also in business of securing data. Now, chips normally carry a lot of information on, which is privy to only themselves. But if you were to track it from manufacturing to deployment, if you were to embed a solution into the chip, that's what Rambus also does. So effectively, if you were to summarize what Rambus does, Rambus is in the business of moving data faster and safer. In fact, that is the tagline of the company. Now, I'll just give an example about how this, I talked about this processing of data between RAM and processor. If you look at the data that's in the cloud today, there's zillions. In fact, just to put a number, we are sending apparently about 120 emails per minute, several trillions pictures a year, and several million messages every other day. So if you look at the total data that's in the cloud, it's about 40 zettabytes. And zettabytes is a trillion gigabytes. And that's apparently likely to go up to 175. Now it's going up, data is going up exponentially, as we can all see. Now what is critical is that our expectation is that we retrieve the data in real time. And not just now, but future also. And now if you look at the data, the technology that we are in, we are expected to be that much faster to retrieve the data, almost at real time. So this is a technology that Rambus is specialized in. In fact, over the last 30 years, it's got developed a lot of patents. In fact, 2,900 patents. But now, over the last few years, the business has moved on to providing service to our clients and customers rather, and also this buffer chip. We talked about that memory bank and processor, the chip in between. That's also picking up. So we are in the midst of all this, and our end markets are data center networking, AI, ML, of course, and then Internet of Things. That's where connected devices come into play, and then you're talking about security again. And ADAS, which is automated driver assistance system. So all of it is happening right now. In fact, this right now, owing to COVID, there's a universal shift to work from home, distant learning, and even entertainment streaming. So all this is actually pushing up the demand for our product. And so hopefully, this interim, we should be in a position to capture some opportunities here. Of course, looking forward, Q3, Q4 is always tough, but Q1, Q1 is very good. Q2, we are in a good position right now. So that talks about the overall business. And in terms of Bangalore, we have engineers roughly about 350, 400 is the total strength. They work entirely from, and right now we are not capital intensive. It's all about people. So we are entirely paranoid about safety, about people. And maybe we can talk about it more, but everyone's working from home right now. I hope that gives a perspective.
Anand, I think your voice.
Is it?
Yeah, I know. It's really the disruptions hitting us. I mean, I'm currently sitting in the middle of a park at all the UPSs. I'm still, and then my Zoom is telling me my internet is unstable. So good to know. Thank you, Anand. Raghu, we all know what Adobe does. I don't think you need to tell us that. But tell me a little bit more about the FP&A function that you lead in India as well as in the other parts of the world.
Sure. Thanks. I mean, that's the one good part of being with Adobe. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the good part of being with Adobe. I have to talk very little about the organization. Photoshops and PDFs are known. There is another part of the company that not many know is the Experience Cloud. The analytics and everything that runs. Most e-commerce companies run analytics on our software. Outside of that, the first thing is I'm glad that we broke the jinx on the finance team when we did the design session with you. And like you said, we were able to take it forward from there. And that's the best part of any training or any discussion that we go through, to be able to drive it to a logical conclusion. As a role, I have about 4 roles to play. One, I manage India sales on the business partnering for finance. So with South Korea. I also manage collections for India sales alone because it's a different market. Money doesn't come in that easily from customers. Outside of that, I also manage for India sales. I provide support in terms of strategy and go-to-market structuring. And then I have the global FP&A shared services. We cut across all the world and support that.
Okay. Interesting. So now, let me start with you, Raghu. Tell me about this disruption. How has it hit your work? I mean, Adobe as such, because very recently we had Amrita on another panel and we talked about how Adobe is coping with it. But tell us a little bit about, how Adobe has been hit and your function. How are you managing?
Sure. So I'll talk about the immediate impact that we had since COVID. Of course, like everybody else, we had to do the work from home shift. I didn't think that we would be able to transition that soon because there are certain functions that need to be in the office. I mean, that's how at least we perceive, working in the industry for many years. But we found that within a week, we were able to transition all of them. We have about 7,000 employees in India, including contractors. Within a week, we were able to move all of them on a work from home model. There were people using desktops because from security reasons, we ran it that way. We were able to get them all laptops, get their headphone systems and move them. And globally, we have about 30,000 people, 35,000 people. So all of them are working from home globally. There is not a single office that's open. That was phenomenal in terms of ability to shift when this was being thought about for many years. And, the push always keeps coming back from business saying that this is impossible. But I think some COVID has taught us what we are capable of transitioning and the acceleration that's important. From a business perspective, we saw a lot of interest coming in from one part of our business, which is the traditional business we run on the Photoshop and Creative Cloud part of it. We saw a lot more activity happening on the online business. The enterprise also continued to do business with us. They want to enhance, because what happened with work from home is the shift model. You know, they used to work on 3 shifts on the same license and stuff like that. That moved away. You know, they weren't working in exactly the same model. They had to make some shifts. So they needed more licenses to operate. So we saw kind of an uptake coming in from enterprise. The market that, you know, went through the toughest was the mid-market, the MSME segment. That apart, on the analytics business, you know, we did have a lot of customers coming back to us, asking us for concessions, what we call concessions in terms of credit extension, renegotiation of contracts and stuff like that. Because a lot of all the airlines in India and the hotel industry run our solutions. And the best part out of this is the banking and financial institution, we saw them actually come back with a very different request, stating they wanted to start working on things which were on their to-do list on the digital transformation journey. They said a lot of things have slowed down generally on the business. We want to use this time to start enhancing on the digital transformation journey for us to be ready when things open up. And including the airlines industry started talking to us in that manner. And that has been an eye-opener for us to realize that the impact the digital transformation has on these businesses, irrespective of what they're going through today. And we did offer, you know, we did kind of make sure that the customers are taken care in terms of the short term and long term of managing their cash flows and all of that. So we, being a cash rich company, we are kind of able to manage that for a certain period of time. And we started seeing that happen. So we didn't see anybody drop off from our list of customers. We've seen them engaging with us much more than ever. And there are customers who come back to us and said, thanks for helping us out. You know, many customers said, many vendors said no to us. So we've seen that, and as an organization, we've been extremely customer-centric and people-centric organization, the way Shantanu drives the business. So I think it really came along. And I just finished a quarter-end meeting with the teams in Korea and in India, because this is our quarter-end today. And we just celebrated the amount of work that went in, you know, talking to customers and making sure they were feeling comfortable across both these markets. So I think it's a great learning that we've had.
Oops.
I think we
Lost it. Oh, there it is.
So, okay. Sorry about that. I think this is really embarrassing. We are going through some major power outage with all the devices running. But thank you, Raghu. That was interesting. The airline example, the airline industry story is very fascinating. I mean, who would have thought? Yeah. So, yeah. So, Anand, let's turn this to you. Tell me more about how you're dealing with this and how your industry is dealing with this.
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, can you hear me, everyone? Okay.
Hello?
I think you're frozen. Okay. Can you hear me?
Hello?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Anand, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
But, Anand, can you hear me?
I can.
I think the rest of us can hear you. You can continue, Anand.
Okay, thank you.
And go on.
All right. Okay. So as I said, first of all, the company is in a good position to make good of the opportunities that are coming in. So there's no disruption on that front. In fact, there's only going to be a greater demand for all of this. On the business side, internally, of course, we were able to cope up pretty good, because one thing that happened was we actually started working from home on the 13th of March, almost almost 12 days before the actual lockdown happened.
Okay.
We probably, saw, we didn't obviously see the lockdown coming, but on 13th of March morning, we decided, let's work from home for 2 weeks and then see what happens. 14th of March, 25% of the work was actually headed home. And they were comfortable by the time 3 days later, they were all comfortably settled at home. In fact, when the lockdown happened, we were actually relieved that there was absolutely no disruption to the business. The only thing that came about little later when the lockdown began was, the engineers would like to see larger screens at the home, and we started shifting them out. And then we also had some onboarding to do, and some innovative stuff happened. We never realized that we could onboard a person during such lockdown time, and you could use his personal computer and get him online. So that was one. The other thing that innovative, just to keep on that side, there was we have a lab where engineers need to go to the lab to test the chip, because whatever we design on the system has to work on the chip. So there is a need for the lab folks to go there, and when they couldn't go, they actually got the electrician in the facility team who was there to plug and unplug through a video call. So technology helps that way. So these are on the site perspective. On the if you talk about finance as a function, maybe the best analogy I can give is I'll try and structure this, because that I thought was a topic I thought we could spend some time. But if you look at playing football in a 120-yard field, and suddenly you're making that infinite kind of a space for the 11 players to play. People are all spread out. So one is I'm trying to use this analogy because one is about the field that you play in, and one is, of course, what happens to the people and what happens to the processes in between, what happens to players and how do they work in between. So trying to get that in the finance space, one is that all our processes in India are all digitized. If you look at the technology, nothing disrupts right now. We are able to function absolutely seamlessly. Everything is connected on the system, and there's no problem. Processes, of course, changed, and in terms of, again, processes, when I say we obviously got a little bit more cautious, like Raghu said, we also, the quarter end close, March 25th, when it happened, we were actually very close to the quarter. And we were having daily calls to make sure that we don't fall through the cracks, because we are answerable to the Wall Street. So everything had to go clockwork. The only interesting thing that, the only disruption I saw was a little bit on banking, because, we have funds that we needed to park in, deposits as treasury function. We had realized that we had never activated an email instruction. We had to, physically scan, and I had run out of cartridge. I have printer at home, but I couldn't get that working. And issues like that. And of course, and then when it came to, and I was talking to Raghu yesterday about how do we make sure that, can we, I have been signing a lot of papers and scanning it and sending it around right now, but how do you do that? Anyway, so that is the processes, technology, and then the third is regulatory. Quite interestingly, the government of India came with a lot of, dilution of, dates, and you can go ahead and take your time, file in board meeting minutes can be extended. So there has been a help on that front. The fourth and most critical part of the people. Thankfully, our team has been very tenured. And thanks to Bangalore rains like this, I've always pushed them out. By the time 5:30, I used to push them out home and work from home rather than stuck in the traffic. So it's been a tried and tested model for us. And so there's been a tremendous, if you look at the people spread out, it's not been a problem for us because they still manage to work seamlessly on that front. So these are the four areas I thought I'll just kind of talk about disruption. And bottom line, it hasn't really much changed the things as we do.
Excellent. So good to know that, because we are also seeing organizations that are struggling and have struggled because BCPs are one thing, and getting them organized and moving people, moving hardware home, etc., have been challenges for organizations. You mentioned something, and Anand, I'd like to address this to you. You talked about onboarding people at this time. And I know this is a question that I ask all my panelists, because to me, because that's pretty much where we work in the space of designing culture, designing behavior. When you cannot give people an experience of a workplace, the fancy spaces that you operate in, and I've been in Raghu's office, I know how fancy that is. I'm sure yours is as great. And people are sitting at home, far from each other, isolated, disconnected. How do you still manage to make their morale high? How do you still manage to make them feel good about joining, about working, coming on board? How does an induction or processes like that work in your world now?
Great question. In fact, just the discussion we are having with the site, we have a site leadership team, and exactly what we are talking about is just this. See, it's the initial days are very critical. Even forget about onboarding in a virtual period. Even otherwise, the initial period, any newcomer, whether it be a fresher or a lateral hire, however senior, he needs to get as comfortable as possible. You need to give him induction. He needs to understand. He might be playing, in cricketing terms, he might be playing test cricket, but this is a one-day match or the other way around. You've got to explain how the rules work, how the culture works here. You've got to help him. So coming back to your question, we have to spend that extra time. In fact, we had one person who was part of the supply chain, joining the 24th of March, a day before the lockdown. And technically he's not part of my team, but made sure that, we reached out to him, how are things, and you got to talk to them. You've got to talk to them, make them part of the organization. You need to explain things to them. And that definitely is paramount. You've got to do it. You cannot ignore. And again, it's not a new guy. However senior, the person has to be handheld, mentored during that period. And we are doing that. In fact, just the chat, as I said, my colleagues, and they are taking care of this specifically.
Interesting. Raghu, how are you guys handling that? I mean, I love the Adobe spaces. I love your designs. I love the vibrant office spaces. And if I join and I don't get a chance to go there, I'll be despondent. And I could be a young person joining, first job types. How does a finance leader like you deal with that?
So interesting. I mean, we all put a process in place to ensure these things are more comfortable and seamless. But like you said, nothing beats like being there. We show them the virtual office. We kind of run a video that shows how the office is from our, images that we have. But that's all, creating excitement. And like Anand said, it takes a lot when you're not going to be there to start talking to them. Right now we also have started hearing video call fatigue happening. Right?
Yes.
That exact, the amount of calls that you need to do being on video is extremely difficult. While we've all done calls for 10 hours in a day, we see that, we're trying to balance it. We are ensuring that people are making phone calls. I've had university grads come on board in my team. I started calling them up. I said, the first couple of calls were on video. Then we said, we'll do general phone calls. We've had 700 people, interns, join us on Tuesday globally, and 18 of them moved into finance. And we have 480 odd engineers joining us later this year. They normally come in June, July, but it's been pushed because of the exams being postponed, the pressures. And we've also had senior hires, VPs and senior directors. So it is not easy for any of them. It might vary, for a fresher versus a VP, because even a VP walking in is expected to perform, and you can only throw things at them in terms of data, but you need to start talking to people, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
But I think the HR, a lot of functions came together, whether it's IT, HR, or even the managers came together to try to make it as comfortable as possible. It's very difficult to get a feedback on how they feel about this whole thing, because one, you're new. Second, you don't get to hear, the honest feedback at the initial part of it. You will probably sense it over a period of time when you hear it from other sources. And we hope that we constantly improve upon this. Hopefully, we will all come back to office, the beautiful offices. And for us, we own all the buildings, so we can't even let it go across the world. So yeah, it is interesting. But I have made it a point to start calling people outside of the Blue Jeans team calls that we do. While we try to make it fun, I have started doing personal calls to everyone. And I keep, calling one or two people at least in a day, 5-minute chat, just to inquire how they're doing and how things are, because I had the habit of walking up to everybody's desk and talking to them. And that's how I built relationships, whether it was my team or beyond. So I started making phone calls. I don't write emails so much, but I found that to make a huge difference. I've even picked up and said, can I talk to your mom or your husband? Because I've known them. I've known them beyond just them. It's interesting. And there are difficulties they go through, because some of them come from small towns where connectivity is not great. The house work from home setup is not good. It is very difficult. So as an organization, what we did is we offered them a reimbursement program. Everybody in the company, 35,000 people have been offered a $500 reimbursement program to set up their work from home, whether it's a table, chair, whatever that's necessary. It's a huge investment as an organization, but we felt that was important. Not everybody was ready to set it up. Bachelors who were sitting in, these PGs were sent back home, right? So they went into small towns. We had to ship laptops to small towns and ensure that they are connected. And where we have difficulty, we've also ensured that we pull the work out of them, given it to somebody else to perform, so that they don't, go through the pressure of worrying about connectivity and all of that stuff. So it's a difficult thing, but I think you have to find new ways of managing it.
New ways of management is what I'm hearing across. Our work has transformed into, we are suddenly a virtual training company. Who would have thought? But yes, we are also looking forward to coming back. And there is from Satya Nadella to Sundar Pichai, everybody's talking about the fact that how sustainable is this? And it's a question that's being asked. So what are your views on that? And linking that to the fact, again, on the question of morale, because I know a lot of times people are asking us this question on this kind of a chat, that jobs are uncertain. Futures are insecure. Morale is one thing that we can talk about. So what does the future really look like? What would the next 12 months? And I don't know, I know that nobody really knows, and I don't want you to do any crystal ball gazing here, but what are you looking forward to from here?
So I'll go first on that. So see, the hope is that we'll all come back to office in some form or fashion, whether it's going to be all of us or most of us. We'll figure that out as these things move. But I think the one option that is, as an organization, we had left the decisions of work from home to a manager. It was a manager discretion program. It wasn't a forced activity. Now what it has given us is that everybody can actually work from home. So eventually we may start looking at it as saying, what are those critical resources who need to be at work, and those who can actually work from home. You look at options of people with kids or, much further away from your office locations. If you're running a campus, we could probably ease out their travel and allow them to work from home. So we may look at multiple options to start ensuring that, there is a benefit of coming to work and also being away from it. Earlier, different managers handled it in a different way. I think we might come back later from this, coming out of this as a policy or as a program, just to ensure that it is easy for everybody to access it. And since I manage sales, and also because South Korea is the other country that's coming out of it, we still, most of our sales reps come and ask us to give permission, because I need the MDs and my permission for them to travel to any customer. So we've right now stopped them from going to meet any customer. We ask them to only do virtual calls at this point, but they all want to come back to work. Most of the calls I take with them, they're sitting in coffee shops. They're getting out of home because life is not more normal than what we hear in other places. So we want to be sensitive. It's not about being easy for things. It's just about that one incident will cause a lot of panic. Then you have to start tracing and looking at. We don't want to put people in trouble with all of that. We've also learned we can sell on a virtual model. We've been closing big deals right now. This quarter we've closed big deals. We're talking to customers with big deals. It is possible. I think when we come out of it, typical of a finance guy, we've always said, cut down your travel costs. And people have been successful in managing.
And training costs.
So eventually we may come back and say, this is how it works. Model will change.
Okay. Lovely. I've had the privilege of working with some of your sales guys, and I know how aggressive and smart they are. So I know where you're coming from. Anand, my next question is to you. And after that, we are going to open it up to audience questions. This is specific to finance. Okay. So this is a question that as a finance leader, what have been some of the new innovative ways that have emerged? I know you're talking about from physically scanning to discovering that you still have to sign, etc. So from the finance management role, what are some of the unique challenges that you have faced and stuff that you could have done purely from your functional perspective?
Good question. So we haven't looked at any innovative ways yet, but a lot of meetings are more, we're looking at the data. Most of the, just on a lighter note, earlier meetings were all, don't get your laptops unless you're presenting. And here
Yeah.
you are bringing your laptop for the meeting, come what may, right? So typically most discussions are very data oriented. I mean, earlier you might have, okay, this is what you can do, etc., and go back and move around. Now you probably tend to stay with screen and so on and so forth. But coming back to your question, I'm not, I can't think of anything that we would have done differently, except around these, we've had some new processes coming up, and we're trying to, we're just kind of figuring it out how as we innovate on that. But no, nothing that I can think of offhand.
Okay.
Can I go on that, Anirban?
Yes, please, Raghu. I would have anyway come to you on this one.
Okay, thank you. So what we did, when we met up for the design thinking workshop, one of those things I was discussing with you is to move to a more automated and reporting engine. Being finance, we used to run massive Excel files, macros and everything. We loved all that. And we used to send these files that people couldn't open or wouldn't understand when they see it. So this is how we used to be because we loved it that way. 2019, I started the journey of moving everything into a dashboarding model, whether we use Tableau or Power BI or whatever. And that is the journey that I wanted my whole team to change, from thinking like a back office, Excel-based reporting into a more dashboard-based business partnering approach. What helped us now is all of my reports are either on the app for all the leaders, right? We did something called Voice of Customer. And we moved everything onto their app or through a dashboard. We don't send Excel files to anyone anymore. We don't have these massive files coming to them. And many times I figured they didn't understand what they were looking at. So dashboard is more visually more appealing and easier to understand. With that, what happened is working from home to run such massive Excel files and to send it to an email is not easy because your bandwidth, everything comes into play. Now with us having moved into a full-fledged dashboard-based reporting, we don't have to send anything. It's all there on the cloud. Everybody can access it at real time. And we've made it 100%. And right now, what I'm also doing for my shared services is building dashboards for global teams. I have started building for international, that is EMEA, Japan, Asia, and North America. And we've built one for the CFO and for the sales leaders globally. So we've started innovating into that. I have now got one guy who just does dashboard for us, a finance systems guy. So I think that move actually in hindsight was at the right time, and it actually helped us at this point in time not to worry about running massive files.
Brilliant. I know that was something that I think you'd mentioned that emerged from your design thinking conversations as well. And I'm so happy that it has worked so beautifully. So let me ask you a couple of questions. And I realized that one of them is actually also coming from one of our attendees. And I think that's a question would have been my automatic next question, is that we're all looking forward to, your innovations, the way of working being back to where we were. Once things ease out, once things normalize, what will you take out of this disruption into the future? What would be, what are your learnings and takeaways? And are there some positives that could be emerging for you as a leader as well as your organization? The way you work, the way you function, the way the business is run, anything. And again, Raghu first.
Okay. It's a tough question because it's a continuous process. The learning will come out of this. And we've just gone through probably close to 3 months from the time we started working from home. One thing is the efficiency we've seen has improved significantly. What used to happen while we were at office is the travel time took away significant amount of the work time, and the efficiency dropped down to maybe 5 hours a day because people would spend 2 to 4 hours, especially with Bangalore. We've seen that improve significantly, and the idea of becoming even more self-service kind of reports will help us navigate this much better. We've started connecting with leaders not because they were physically there in that office, now that because we make phone calls and talk to them. I think some of these will probably help us connect. Uh, just as a thing, if you don't do business partnering well, you actually wait for the physical presence of a leader to start talking about business. That's typically
Right.
how it's. Now we've learned that that doesn't matter, right? We make phone calls, we send reports, we kind of then talk through those things. I think all of that, we need to take it to the next level, and we need to start seeing how much more can we report and help them in terms of KPIs and stuff like that that can help, improve. And we've also started building models now for the company to take decisions around people, around facilities, around costs, around travel and everything. Where do we move from here? What does revenue look like if these impacts come in? Or, there is also opportunities to grow. We are seeing opportunities for us to accelerate our business in certain functions. So where do we shift the investment? Reinvestment is another one that we're looking at. Where do we move people from? The intent, we've made it very clear that we're not going to do layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
The CEO has made an announcement that we are well within our range to be able to manage people. It's just that we may look at restructuring some of the business to ensure there is more money and investment put in where the returns are going to be there, short and long term. So that models we are preparing. Hopefully all of this will give us more insight into how we should run the business more efficiently. And because we are also a listed company, it becomes that much more important for us to ensure the EPS and everything is managed well.
Okay. Fantastic. Anand, your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So on the lighter note, one thing I would not carry to the office is please be on mute. But on a serious note, I've been, there have been a lot of learnings. One is that we might take this work from home more frequently because, as Raghu pointed out, we've had a lot of people wasting time on the traffic. I used to feel guilty if people are there at 8 o'clock in the night, 7:38, and then taking 2.5 hours to reach home, messaging. So clearly, we might have more work from home. That's one. The second thing which I noticed very positively is that, when you leave them alone, you're not micromanaging them. You've seen a lot of leadership coming up within the teams themselves. So by the end, there's a lot of thinking that people are doing by themselves. Mm-hmm. And, and clearly I can see a few people, who are responding the way I had not seen before. Mm. When you see them, you always, they're okay, do it this way, do it that way. But now we don't have meetings, we don't have Zoom meetings every day, we don't have video meetings every day, but every week we connect on a video. But otherwise we have group meetings periodically. But certainly I've seen sparks in certain people that did not come out earlier.
Okay. Interesting. So the people angle is what you're focusing on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. So we have covered very interesting spaces. We have talked about culture. We've talked about morale. We have talked about some of the stuff that we'll take forward with us. So let me turn to more questions. I have Anshuman from Mercedes-Benz asking me a very interesting question. He's talking about the key thing that we should ask. What would be leadership's role? What should leadership do right when it comes to bringing employees back to work? If you can tell me one thing as a leader that you think leaders should do to make the seamless transition back to a workplace happen, what would that be? Anand, one thing.
It's back to retuning the whole thing would be the first. Yes. You're working in a different environment. When you come back, obviously the first thing is to regroup. Okay, what went well, what went wrong, and go back. Rather than pushing back, it's difficult to reorient yourself. It's going to take a while, I know for sure, for all of us going, because we do have some constraints in going back because of lift, etc. But certainly, I think first few days would be just sitting across and say, okay, what are we doing differently, and how would you like to? And I can see certainly some new ways of doing things coming out.
Okay. Raghu, as a leader, what's the first thing you will do to enable a seamless return?
I think very similar lines. People is where it will start with. When you start getting people, I would prefer to look at learnings that came out of the work from home model. What did we do well? Where did we actually, manage ourselves well? And how can we bring it into the office environment? Because like we said earlier in the question that was asked, efficiency was a challenge because of the environment around us. And that just changed in overnight with this model. And we have to see that how do we balance that better. It's not about adding more people to get work done. And how can we kind of improve upon what we were before this and when we come back into office. And I'm looking at it as my own team growing bigger with COVID, because the investment I see is going to be more into my team to add more value coming into the business, because we're going to be running a ton of models to see how business has to operate over the coming year. For that, you need a set of people who can keep doing it and churning reports for you on a regular basis, giving you that. So the idea is to how can we expand what we are doing and how can we improve upon what we're doing. I don't have an answer for the whole thing because it's very difficult. I'm also thinking through as we go along. Will everybody? The one thing that I hear from my team is I want to come back to office. Everybody wants to go do those dinners and lunches and meet people and everything. So there will be a lot of rush that will happen. There will be a lot of excitement. But I hope we come back with a lot of learning and hold on to it when we come back to work, rather than becoming what we were before we went into the COVID situation.
Thank you, Raghu. Anand, a question for you, and this is coming again from one of our attendees. He's asking it very interestingly. He says, as a dyed-in-the-wool finance person, how are you going to innovate in your function? What are some of the learnings from COVID that would transform longer term, maybe, for the role of the site head or the role of the finance head? Considering that a lot of people believe that finance teams are more conservative. The language being used is it's against the grain to take risks and go out and do new things. What are some of that? You may not have an answer for a short term because we're all struggling with that, but what could be a long term? And you are probably the best person to answer that.
No, one thing's for sure, and I was trying to think of in the earlier question itself. One is innovation is not, the way we have even moved here was a way to work was innovation by itself. And even if we were to ask the team, there are many ways to do things, several things. In fact, and we continuously keep on improving. There's so much of changes that we continuously do. One is the processes are compliance related. You can't take a chance, obviously. Compliance related is always cast in stone. You can't file a return differently or something. That's all very different. But internal processes are always amenable to change. And we continuously keep looking at new ways to do things. So I can't point out what would we do when we come back and do differently. I can't think of anything, but it is an ongoing process. That again, I may not be having the right answers, the desired answer, but it's a process by itself.
Interesting, because that question came from Biren, who has been a panelist and known to ask the questions that really have a lot of value. Thank you, Biren, for asking that. Biren actually has a second question, and this one is specific to Raghu. And I'm reading this out because it's a nicely put question. C19 has brought many dark clouds. How are you as a strategic finance man looking at R&D and investments in new apps at a time when there will be massive demand shock across most industries? Will licenses become unaffordable for industries that are seeing idle and downtime?
So he has a way with words.
Yes, of course, as we know.
So, the answer is, like I said earlier, we are building models around what will work for the subscription model that we are running on right now. And we are already looking at reinvestment and between teams of where we need to put that money. Because we were R&D, as you know, there is a lot of investment on short term. Now we have been looking at that. We're building models. We haven't come to a decision on what we should be doing, but we tend to build models onto where we need to invest, where are we seeing the return. So all of this is to identify and make that decision around where do we move people, where do we see strength, where do we see the business moving for us. And that's what we're trying to look at this point. We are seeing traction coming out, but the question is that a short term, just because COVID happened, people are quickly trying to buy out more licenses. Will that sustain on the longer term or 3 months down the line is something we are trying to understand. If that continuity is not there, then we're putting money in the wrong bucket, because once it starts hitting then your cost goes up over there. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. All we are trying to do is look at keeping a balance sheet that is strong. While I said we are cash rich today, us not managing well will mean that will deplete, because whole of this quarter we've not collected money from our customers. We've allowed them to have a credit extension. So we have to be more sensible about how we're running that. We're looking at 2 or 3 factors. One, building models around revenue and cost. How do we manage that? And building around how do we look at expenses, which are of large nature. When we run certain businesses, we have certain costs which are pretty significant and related to revenue, like credit card fees and stuff like that. So we're looking at all of those, try and rebuild a new model.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered all of what he was asking.
No, I think it's a fair answer, and we will live with that for the time being, because I think that's a fair enough answer under the scenario. I'm going to ask this question again to Anand. Anand, if you think of now, we have about 10 minutes left, so it's time for us to kind of ask these questions, which are slightly beyond the finance scope. For future leaders or future employees, what would you suggest are the key competencies that they must develop to flourish in the post-COVID, post-disruption world? And I'm going to ask both you gentlemen about that, and then you take that from there.
No, very valid question. See, the kind of jobs that are getting lost today, and you might have studied a particular vocation or rather hotel management, whatever the industries, things are getting collapsing. I think it's a more holistic kind of thing. You need to, you cannot take a science, you cannot go deep and look at it from a top down. And I don't know, the education system itself has to change that way, because I've seen even in the current education system, everyone is rule-based, but connecting the dots is something that is not there today. So connecting the dots a little bit more, always zoom in, zoom out is very critical. So, kids today, and I've been doing my son alone completely. I never told him to study all these last 2.5 months. Ordinarily I've done that. But I said, this is going to be a different world. Observe. Eventually it's about people. It's about communication. It's about influencing. Learn the soft skills first, and then try to make a sense of the world, what's happening. I think and be willing to learn anything on a fly. Enough and more stuff is there on YouTube. You can pick it up, but the curiosity to learn and apply, how it adds up, what is the difference you're making to the organization, what is the difference you're making to your customer. That is the approach you need to. You cannot get down to certain accounting standards, or it's no longer relevant, because you will have experts, you will have bots doing that very soon. So you have to think. And it's unfortunate. This is unfortunate because the rules are getting very, very tight. They have been, just to give an example, GST has apparently given a 250 circulars beyond. But and the expert there has to continuously read that. That is no longer going to take you. I mean, I don't mean to discredit anybody here, but the fact is that you need to look at it holistically all the time. And that's where you can make a difference, because machines are going to take over, even in accounting. And I tell that to the team as well. Unfortunately, what do you do? Bring in a human element.
Yeah.
You cannot, very soon bots will take over. That's the dangerous part about this function.
Excellent point. I really, really loved hearing that. Absolutely. It's so real and so I would say pertinent to where we are and where we are headed. Thank you so much for saying that. Raghu, what would your thoughts be on that?
So for me, customer experience is the term that you hear most often, which is largely related to sales and the actual end customer. But I have always been talking about that being extended into each and every function within the organization. Customer is a customer, whether it's internal or external. Once you start looking at it from that point of view, your whole work model changes. Otherwise, if you see, historically, we've been back-ended teams or very transactional functions in many ways. We've stopped interacting with people. We've stopped becoming a business partner. And the moment we start moving away from that, and like I said, certain transactional work will move into bots eventually. Now, once you move into a customer experience kind of model, you start seeing better value. And customers start seeing value in you. And that's the transformation I did with my team, who were not known to their customers to now being referred to in every meeting saying that the change that they brought in. So you have to start implementing that. We should take the fear away that, I'm holding on to this kind of a role and hence I don't want anybody else to know about it. Now those days are gone. Mm-hmm. You have to trust yourself. You have to move away from it. If we can bring more breadth in our roles and not just stick to one type of job, I think we will be better off being able to find more options to work with customers, internal or external. And I'm constantly, as an individual, I'm constantly looking at, that kind of an innovation myself. Even with COVID, all I'm doing right now is building a presentation for my CFO to say how he should be investing in me and my team to get better outcome out of this. And it's not about bad and good time. You have to be able to drive the message to people. You should show them that there is options available because they have a million other things to look at too.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. The question was from Rohan Nabart. Thank you, Rohan. Great question. I am pretty much almost running out of time. So I have the time, and 1 hour just flies. I mean, seriously, it's never enough. I'm just going to ask my favorite question, and which is my question at the end, which is, tell me about home. Tell me about how two finance leaders or two leaders of two very large organizations are you dealing with it? What's changed at home? How's home life? How's the balance working out for you? Yeah. Anand, what about you? Let's start with you.
Well, I've washed more dishes than I've ever done in the past, for sure. But that apart, it's been a very good 2.5 months. It's been a huge learning curve for me. This is one of the steepest learning curves I've had. Looking back into my 30 years, I've had periodic ones, but this has probably been a very good one. I took the time when we talked from work from home, the first thing was to catch up on the traffic time. I was losing 3 hours every day. So I learned the piano. I must have spent about 200 hours on YouTube to understand. I can have a conversation with a pianist right now, except that I can't play it as well, but I have understood the music theory, the scales, the progressions, the circle of fifth, many things on the musical front. That apart, I've increased my walking time. I used to do 30 minutes, now I do 1 hour. That's the second. I've lost my appetite for sleep, unfortunately, has gone down. Rather, it's kind of, I've lost too many hours waking up than sleeping. So that's one negative part. But I've now started meditation for the last 10 days, and it will take time to get some control on that front. But it's been a very, very good period for me to introspect. And as I said, on the people front, I'm extremely happy the way the team in the offices risen to the occasion, and I'm seeing them develop also. So, and I used to feel very guilty when they used to work and so late and go home. Overall, I know there's been a lot of suffering outside, and I'm grateful and fortunate that we are sitting here able to communicate, but a huge amount of gratitude on that front.
Thank you, Anand. Beautifully put. Thank you so much. Raghu.
For me, I've been used to working from home because of travel and all of that. And my office is very close to home. So I didn't have much of the traffic issue for many years. I think what I've managed to do is build more relationship with customers, because I've had to do a lot of customer calls during this time to talk to them about continuity and stuff like that. I would have not done that on a normal day because the sales guy or the MD would have flown down to meet the customer. So now, because we're trying to catch up with a lot of them, they've asked me to speak to a lot of CXOs, who are our customers. That's a new thing that happened. In terms of, I've started building a discipline over time. I am kind of a lazy guy while I have my cycling interest, but those are things to get me out of the couch. I started cycling. I developed a issue with my shoulder, and I had to go to the physiotherapist every day, and I started cycling to a physiotherapist, which was good. It was my time, no traffic on the road. It was, I loved that personal time on the bike. My son, knowing how lazy I can get, started putting a workout regime for me every evening. And we started working out together as a family. we attended music shows online. We had Shan. We are having Shankar Mahadevan sing next week for us online. So it's been new, and we've seen our son actually at home. Sad for the kids that they look forward to a summertime to play, have fun. To see them having to wake up and help us out every day at home is sad, but it also shows how they have matured. And grown up. And like you said, just like you enjoy pets, it's wonderful. They are with me in every meeting. Everybody knows that these two guys are sitting with me in my meeting. I've enjoyed that period. Thing I don't like is when we can't go out of home. That's a little frustrating. And I didn't have a very proper setup in terms of work from home. I didn't want to have one so that I don't sit at home, but that turned out to be something that I need to invest in. But otherwise, I think it's been a great family bonding. I haven't had meals every day with the family on the table. Otherwise, we've always been moving around. It's a 10-minute quick meal, watching TV or something like that. At least we've made it a habit to sit together, switch off everything and talk. I think probably the time that may not come back once we all get back to normalcy.
Who knows? Who knows? Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Raghu. It has been an absolute pleasure having you two gentlemen. My fears of finance people have been also allayed to a large extent. So thank you for your time today. We're also out of time. So we tried to address as many questions as we could, but it's difficult to manage so much. So thank you so much to our participants for participating, sharing these questions. And we are out of time. So I'm going to bid adieu to my two lovely guests. We are back next Friday with two other gentlemen. We have the regional EMEA CTO of Automation Anywhere, Pramod Agarwal, and he is going to sit across from Sri Krishnan, who heads innovation and technology at Robert Bosch. And we're going to talk about drones and farming, among other things. So I'm looking forward to that. And I hope some of you can join us, all of you can join us. So thank you again, gentlemen. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay sane, and I'll see you soon. All the very best. Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure.
Pleasure, absolutely. Thank you so much.